All right, guys, what's going on? This is D Car Lady coming at you. All right, today we're going to talk about being an entrepreneur virgin. How I got my cherry popped. All right, we're going to dive deep into this, and perhaps you guys probably can relate. Maybe you are an entrepreneur virgin and have not yet had your cherry popped. All right, so definitely stick around to the end, guys, because you already know I have a sweet bonus for you. And if this is your first time on my channel, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, right? So you can be alerted the next time I come out with some content, because I'm bringing it to you every single week. So let's check it out. Let's see what we got. What's going on, everybody? It's D Car Lady coming at you. All right, today I wanted to talk about, just ask you guys something. When was the first time you had your cherry pop? And I'm going to talk about, now you can put down in the comments when your first time was, but I wanted to talk about mine. First time I had my entrepreneurial cherry pop. All right, so to do that, let me kind of, give you guys the backstory a little bit, right? And then I'm going to lead up to let you know that moment when I had my cherry pop. All right, now as you come in, just put down in the comments, let me know where you're tuning in from. All right, I always like to know people's city and state where they're tuning in from. All right, so let me jump right into it. All right, so growing up, just kind of give you guys, where I've come from type situation, right? Growing up, I grew up in Rochester, New York. It's upstate. It's not the city part, but it's not the country either, right? We grew up in a low income areas. Myself, my mom, and my two brothers, right? So basically the four of us. And growing up, I always saw my mom, she typically kept at least one job, if not two. But if she had one job, she was working like 16 hours a day, right? And, over time, she also became an entrepreneur as well. She was doing like buying and selling of antiques, right? So I would see my mom basically, working all of these hours, right? And at the time, I knew nothing different, so this is what I thought, life was supposed to be about. I started working all these hours, and then I saw her sprout into entrepreneurship, buying and selling antiques. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. So along these years, the things that I've done, all right, before my cherry got popped, you guys probably can relate. When I was younger, it probably started with me learning to play Tunk. It's a card game, right, that you can gamble with, right? And at the time we were playing for like dimes, and if we were, feeling real rich or whatever, having high stakes was playing for a quarter, right? Playing card games for a quarter, I probably had to be about maybe 7 years old, right? And so what I liked about that is I liked the rush of winning. It wasn't really about the money. It was just about winning. I really liked winning. I was a competitive person. My brothers were competitive. They played sports and everything. So I learned to be competitive at an early age, and I liked winning. So from there, it went on to things like, recycling bottles and cans, like in Rochester. And there's still some states, that do that, where you can recycle bottles and cans, right? And so I would go from house to house in the neighborhood, asking them if they had any old bottles and cans, right? Because we could get a 5-cent deposit if we turned it into the store, right? And a lot of people in the neighborhood, they didn't want to take their own bottles and cans. They were a little bit older, and they didn't want to be bothered with it. But I was young. I was like, hey, this would be some extra, some extra spending money, if you will, some extra snack money. I was really young then still, right? So I had a little bit of taste of making money, if you will. But once again, it wasn't about the money per se. It was like, oh, well, this is cool. It was just something cool. It's like, oh, okay, this is cool. So it's just kind of a taste of it. And then moving along as I got a little bit older, still a kid, I remember wanting to go to basketball camp. And typically my mom would pay for me to go to basketball camp. She would save up like 6 months just to pay $300 to go to basketball camp, right? And one summer, there's a basketball camp that I wanted to go to. And I asked her in advance, because, if your mom's on I'm not going to say a fixed income, because it wasn't a fixed income. It wasn't like government assisted income, but it was a low income, right? And you don't know when it's going to come type situation. When you're in that situation, you have to ask your mom stuff ahead of time, right? Your mom or dad. But in my case, I had to ask my mom ahead of time, like, like 5 months ahead, like, Mom, I want to go to camp this time, can you, have this money? So she let me know ahead that she was not going to have it, for that particular summer. I said, okay, well, I asked way enough in advance and everything. So, I said, all right, so I know what I'll do. I'll just go and, sell some more bottles of cans, right? And what I started doing is I started selling candy at school. And by this time I was in high school, right? And I was, I had seen another fella. He had become known as the candy guy, right? Because he would sell, like, how you can go to Sam's or Walmart. Well, it was really Sam's actually, and you could go and you could get like Snickers and Skittles and Paydays, and all that type of candy, right? And you would get it and you could buy it in bulk, right? You could buy it in bulk and then you'd sell it for a little bit more, and so you'd make maybe 35 cents or something like that, per candy bar. So I said, well, you know what, I'm going to do that, and it is to sell the bottles of cans. I'm going to do that so I can go to basketball camp, So I did that. It probably took me, and this basketball camp was only about less than a couple $100, right? But I swear it took me like 6 months, right, to save up the money. But it's all good, right? So I did that, and what I was feeling at that time was like a sense of accomplishment. It's like, okay, I'm trading the actual product for money, right? And at the time I didn't realize it, that basically everything, that I was used to doing was trading a product that I could kind of like feel, or one that I was, really, really familiar with, for money, right? It's so it wasn't too much different than having a job. When we went to a job, it was something that was familiar to us, so I was, so I had become used to seeing my mom go and work for 16 hours. In exchange for the 16 hours she worked, she would get X amount of money, right? So I was used to seeing that. Okay, so as I went through my life, these things just were kind of normal to me. They just seemed like, oh, this is how it goes. But through the whole time growing up as a kid, there was never a time at that moment that made me think that, oh, I'm going to be, entrepreneur. I'm going to be self-employed, right? I'm not going to hold down a job. That never entered my mind, right? Because I, sold bottles and cans, and I gambled on card games, right? And I sold candy and stuff. I did those things, but it was like, that was like a little side hustle type thing, right? It wasn't that, oh, well, this is actually a thing, right? Where, you can actually make a living doing something other than going to work, right? Because the most of what I saw was my mom, even though she did those other side things sometimes, she still went and worked 16 hours a day at a job, right? So it wasn't then that I even thought that was possible. I didn't even think about that, right? So moving forward, so at this time I would still consider myself, at that point in time, I would still consider myself a virgin, right? A entrepreneur virgin. A cherry hadn't been popped yet, right? It was just some little side hustles. I'm sure you guys can relate. You probably had some little side hustles when you were a kid, right? But you still, had dreams of going to school, going to college, getting a great job, maybe a job where you wore a dress or a suit and tie, whatever, you're going to wear, and maybe carry a briefcase. You probably had those same dreams, right? Same aspirations. So it wasn't until I became a little bit older and I got on my own, right? And I got on my own. I was probably about maybe 21, something like that, when I first, got on my own. I was in college. And, I kind of got introduced to entrepreneurship at the, a little bit more like from someone that wasn't in my family, right? And one of the companies that I actually started with, I don't know, you guys probably have heard of this company. It was called SMC. It was a Specialty Merchandise Corporation. And what you did with SMC, basically it was like mail order. Like you could, a person could buy these like sculptures, it was really neat sculptures, really cool sculptures. And they would drop ship it, to the customer, and you'd make, whatever profit was in between. So I'm like, oh, cool. I just had to buy into the product, right? Buy into the company, and it wasn't that expensive, right? And so I buy into the company. And then the first thing you want to do is you want to tell all your friends, right? Oh my gosh, I'm in this wonderful company and look at these awesome products, right? Because you want to make the commission, right? So I did sell a few things to some friends of mine, and I'm gonna be honest, I think they just bought them just to like kind of be supportive. Oh, that was really nice, right? Because I only sold a few things, right? But I could relate to that, actually my mom did that company in the past as well, but I could relate to it because it was something physical. I was like, okay, this is a physical book that I'm getting. and the person who's buying something is getting something physical and tangible, so that when they get it, they were probably in my neighborhood, and I would go over to their house and like, hey, did your, sculpture, your dolphin sculpture come in, right? And, and I could see the excitement on their face and all this stuff, and so it was pretty awesome, right? But my cherry still wasn't popped, because like I said, that was still something that I could relate to. It's tangible. All right, so moving forward, I still kept the job. I still kept the job, sometimes two. And I wound up working, a few years after that, I wound up working at Blockbuster. Now, this had to be around like 2005 or something like that. Blockbuster was still around. They're not around anymore. There's that, right? But I was working at a Blockbuster in Durham, okay, in Durham, North Carolina. I was working at a Blockbuster, and I was working as an assistant manager. And at the time, the pay was pretty good. It was actually above average pay at that time. It was, I mean, it's taking care of my bills for sure. And I had some money to party, I was still young, right? So I had some money to party and buy fresh white teas every week, right? I was still young, right? So I was good. But what happened was, I kind of got a little bored. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. You're doing your job, or you doing jobs, or whatever the case may be, right? And it just kind of seems like, okay, at that time I was making like $11.40 or something like that. And I'm like, okay, making, enough money. But it seemed like the days just kind of ran together. It was like, it wasn't any excitement or anything, right? I wasn't like, remember I told you I like to win, right? So I wasn't like winning anything. It was like, it wasn't a challenge to be better, right? I was already comfortable in a low pay, and, we had set pay raises, if you will. So it wasn't like, oh, if I like sold a whole bunch of stuff, I was going to get like a $5 per hour raise. It wasn't like that, right? So it's like, okay, cool, whatever. So I came across, I don't know why I was looking on the internet. And the internet was really new then. I mean, like 2005 or something, right? So yeah, internet was really new. But I did have a computer, right? So I happened to be looking online, and I saw this advertisement. It was actually for a site that was a roommate referral site, where they would basically link people up who were looking to rent a room with people who wanted to, who had a room for rent, right? And I thought that was really cool. I'm like, that's interesting, right? So, I mean, I didn't have much going on, because it's like a lot, well, for me anyway, when I had a job, it's like, okay, I put in my hours, then I go home. So I didn't really have a whole bunch of other obligations other than myself, right? So it's like, okay, let me just, surf the web. And I saw this and I said, oh, that's pretty interesting. I never had heard of it, because like I said, at the time, the internet was not big, we were still big on newspaper, but I had an idea. I said, now I look in the paper all the time, because at the time it was the Herald Sun. I don't know if it's still called the Durham Herald Sun, but it was a Herald Sun. And I would look in the paper all the time, just looking, you know how you get the Sunday paper, right? And you get all the coupons, even though you probably don't redeem the coupons, and they just like pile up in your drawer. So I get the newspaper, every Sunday. And I saw this, this website, and I saw it and I said, that's a pretty neat idea. I said, on the newspaper, I see all the time that people are renting rooms, like they'll be like room for rent, room for rent, room for rent, right? I said, so I wonder why those people are advertising in the paper saying that they have a room for rent. Why aren't they just on this site, so that they can go ahead and get the room rented, right? So I thought about it for a quick moment, then I'm like, that sounds like opportunity, right? Literally, this is what I thought. I said, well, those people don't know about these people. So what if I could be the glue in between those two people, right? The ones who had the room for rent, the people who were looking to rent the room. So I came up with this idea, and I had no clue if it was going to work, if it was not going to work. I didn't have like previous business experience to say, hey, this is how you make a business plan. This is how you gauge return on investment. This is how you present your product, attractive or anything. I didn't know any of that stuff, right? I didn't know any of that stuff. All I knew is that it was an idea, and I thought it was brilliant, right? So what I did was I just kind of like, took a piece of paper. I wasn't even writing, typing on the computer. I just, lo and had a piece of paper. I said, okay. And I just kind of made like an outline, like these people want rooms. These people have rooms for rent, right? This website was charging X amount of dollars. So how much should I charge for it, right? So I came up with a price, and it was $19.99 per month, $19.99 a month, because The other website was doing a monthly subscription. So I said, well, let me do one. Yeah, that'll work, right? And so I took some of the same terminology that they had as far as like the terms, you know, for actually being a member and everything. And I kind of made them my own, if you will, you know, use some of the terms and kind of put them in my own words. I said, okay, yeah. So yeah, didn't have an attorney or anything look that over, but you know, I was like, yeah, so this will work. So that way, you know, people will pay me and, you know, it's going to be great. You know, I'll just link them up and just get this information and link them up. Right. So it's going to be awesome. So I put it together. It probably took me about maybe, I don't know, probably like a week, right? Because like, you know how when you get excited about something, it doesn't take you that long. Whereas if you're not really excited, it can take you like 4 months and you're still working on like one thing, right? So I was really excited. So I got it done in like a week. I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna be awesome, right? And I knew that I could place an ad in a paper, right? So I placed an ad in the paper and I even named it. Okay, now if you guys, I don't know, probably none of you guys read the newspaper back then, but it was called Bull City Roommates because Durham is known as the Bull City, right? So it's called Bull City Roommates. And that's what I called the company. Yeah, I made that up. So it worked. So I put an ad in the paper saying that could help people, you know, if you had a room for rent, you could, you know, list it for $19.99 a month with me. And I had a guarantee that I would find you at least, I think it was like 75% of your criteria. I had a survey that they fill out, right? And when they thought the survey, then I get based on the answers of the survey, I could guarantee that I find at least a 70% match of their answers to the survey, right? So I was kind of like making sure I could deliver, you know, on whatever it is that I was putting out. So, so lo and behold, you know, the first month, you know, it was like a lot of researching. Like I had a few inquiries, but it was a lot of researching, right? Nobody had paid yet, but I was like, okay, I just got to figure out, you know, I didn't know it was going to be this much work, but I just got to figure out how I can like research, you know, to find these people, get them to call me, right? Because I didn't know anything about Google Voice numbers or anything like that. I don't even think they had them. I don't even know. But, you know, so people were just calling my cell phone, right? Because I did have a cell phone. So people just called my cell phone, you know? So I remember one day I was at Blockbuster because I told you I worked full time at Blockbuster, right? And typically during the day, because I work during the day, typically during the day, it would be slow, right? It would be slow and then we'd have a spurt. It'd like dead and then you might have like an hour spurt of, it seemed like everybody on their lunchtime wanted to come, drop the movies off and grab another movie, right? All right, cool. Right? So I'm there at Blockbuster and I don't know what it was about this day, but I'm there and my phone was like blowing up. It's like, you know, whatever ringtone I had at the time. I'm sure it wasn't, you know, it's probably some song, right? But, you know, my phone was blowing up, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I'm seeing, you know, the numbers or whatever, but I couldn't answer, you know, because it was during this rush, you know, of people coming in. It was during this rush. And I'm like, oh man. You know, so I'm like hurrying up trying to help the customers or whatever, because if you guys work in retail or anything like that, you know, like if it's typically slow, it'll only be like one person working, right? It's not like 5 people. So you're like the only one in the store. So, you know, I couldn't really respond to the calls like I wanted to because, you know, it was lunchtime and lunch rush or whatever. And people were like coming in and I'm like, ah, man, that pretty much sucked, right? But that's okay, no problem. So when I got off of work, you know, I went home and I'm, you know, checking my messages because back then people still left voicemail messages. What happened to that? It's a lost art. But I checked my messages and there is a woman who left a voicemail and said that she was looking to rent out her room. Okay. And I said, okay, cool. I said, oh my gosh, you know, somebody, you know, who actually is ready to do business, right? And you know, I had my price displayed and everything at $19.99 a month. So I set up an appointment for her to come over. Now, mind you, when I say come over, it wasn't come over to an office, right? Okay. It was come over to my apartment, my 1-bedroom apartment, right? My 1-bedroom apartment that didn't have an office, right? My 1-bedroom apartment that didn't have an office, that the office was literally the living room, right? And the living room was literally the dining room, okay? That type of apartment. Oh, and did I mention I lived in a low-income area too, in East Durham, right? So now the good thing about Durham is that it has pockets. So like you could live in the East Durham. Now it might not be the same now, but you could live in East Durham and it'd be like, you know, real hood, but you could live on like this end of the street and it'd be okay. but you go down the street and it's like they're shooting each other, right? So I lived like on this end of the street, right? So it was like, okay, but it was still East Durham, right? And I say East Durham at the time, I don't know how it is now. So anyway, I set up the appointment, and I set it up for a time that I was off, right? So I'm there now. Now imagine, right? I'm there, and I got my dress pants on, because back then I was wearing my hair in braids, but it was those ones that you have, the fake hair in there, right? The weave stuff in there, right? That's what I was wearing back then. So it was in one of them little bun things, right? Sorry. So I got on my blouse, right? Got on my blouse, get my little hoop earrings. I got a meeting, right? So they come over, right? They come over and they come upstairs, and the house is nice and clean, but like I said, it's a 1-bedroom apartment. It's no office. It's what I made it, right? So they come in and everything, and I shake their hand and sit down, and we're talking and all this good stuff, and they're like excited, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is happening. Oh my gosh, right? So I'm trying not to show my emotions at the time, because I'm like, well, what if they don't pay me though? They sound good now, but what if they don't pay me? So at the end of that, they wind up writing me a check, right? And I'm like, so like, if you ever have something like this, something happens, right, that you're really happy, but you don't really be wanting to show it on the outside, right? You know what I'm saying? So I was like, okay, ma'am, da 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 da, and this is the 30 days, blah blah blah, whatever, right? So I shake their hand, and they leave and everything. And of course, I had like some little agreement signed up where they written up where they sign it, right? So I give them their copy of the agreement, which basically that meant I printed out 2 agreements, and they signed one of them and they kept one, right? So as soon as like they left, I remember thinking, wait a minute, somebody just paid me, right? It's like, wait a minute, somebody just paid me for something that they didn't like grab in their hand. Like, remind you, they were buying a membership, right? And they were buying a membership for me. And they were buying a membership for me, and I lived in the hood. And like all of these things that I didn't realize were kind of things that were like kind of set in my head of reasons why, people, like why I wouldn't be able to be successful in that type of business, meaning like what I consider a real business, right? Was the fact that it was me, right? Like, how many of you felt that way? Like, yeah, other people could be successful, but this is me. I don't know. They're not really gonna pay me, right? Then it was like, okay, yeah, other people could be successful, but they have an office, and I pretty much had a living room. Yeah, other people can be successful, but they have an office in, over by South Point. Now this is before South Point was a thing, but over in Hope Valley, right, which is an affluent area. It was in Durham, right? And this is me in East Durham, in the hood. They're probably shooting down the road, right? So imagine how stoked I was, how excited I was, right, that this was happening. I mean, and we're talking about $19.99. And I told you at the time, it was around like 2005. So I was making like $11.40 an hour at my job. So I was making, so $19.99 wasn't no money, is my point, right? But to me, a check for $19.99 that someone came to the hood to give me, that thing was like somebody just gave me $1,000, and back then $1,000 was a lot of money, right? That was like somebody just gave me $1,000. I was like, oh my gosh, right? And it was that moment that my cherry was first popped. My entrepreneur cherry was first popped. It wasn't all the times before when I gambled with my family for and played tongue. It wasn't the times when I sold candy, right? Because that was a physical thing, right? It wasn't the times when I sold bottles of cans, because that was a physical thing, right? It wasn't a time when I got the job that paid above average, because that was typical. Everybody gets jobs, right? I was used to that. But when somebody paid me for something I thought of, right? And it was like, oh my gosh, who pays me, right? And of course, the next thing, that kind of kicks in is this little doubt, like, did they just give me a check and it's gonna bounce, right? Because back then people still wrote checks, right? But people still bounce checks too, right? So that kicked in right then. But lo and behold, it actually, I was actually able to cash a check, so it did not bounce. So that made it even like, how like when we say you're cherry popped, right? People think of sex, right? Well, imagine this. Imagine an orgasm, right? Imagine that moment was an orgasm. But then when I cashed a check, that was like the second small orgasm, right? So imagine you having two, right? Like a big one, boo! And then you keep going and you have another little one like, woo, like where you get that high octave on your voice, right? So that, right, was when I had my entrepreneurial cherry pop, right? Now, I'm not going to tell you that it's never happened again, because it has, okay? But that's the first time that it happened to me. It let me know that regardless of political issues. Now, I wasn't political then, but I don't know about you, but my mom, she would discuss some things political as it relates to the president, right? But I didn't really get into the stuff. I just listened to her. But the political issues didn't matter. My race didn't matter. Where I lived didn't matter, right? What I wore didn't matter. How I looked didn't matter, right? At that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered is that I had came up with something, and I didn't create it out of thin air. So so I'm not saying that, oh yeah, I invented this. No, I saw someone else doing it. And I said, I can do it, right? I didn't know if I could do it. I just said I could do it, right? I just said it, right? I just said it, so therefore I did it, right? But I didn't know if I could really do it until it happened. It's like, oh my gosh, did I just do that, right? Did I do that, right? So it was that moment that let me know that all of these things were possible if I just believed that it could happen to me, and that I was willing to do what I needed to do what I didn't see anyone else doing, because I didn't have anyone else to see doing these things, right? Everybody else was like big companies that I saw, right? Now, I wish I could tell you some, rags to riches story, like, oh my gosh, I did that and I became a millionaire. No, right? What did happen is something that I've since learned from. I, kept my job, and the calls start coming in a lot more frequently, and I couldn't keep up because I had my job. And I was not at the point, even though that's when my cherry was popped, right? I was not yet mentally at the point of saying, I'm going to go all in with this thing that I somehow created, and I'm going to leave my sense of security of what I was raised on, what I grew up on, what I knew, which was having a job, right? I wasn't there yet mentally. So what happened was, you only get 24 hours in a day, right? I get 24, you get 24, everybody gets 24. So if I'm giving all of my time to this job, I literally didn't have the time to give to this. I'm here 8 hours, and then you sleep, and you do what you do and everything. And I literally could not keep up with the phone calls here. So even though I got paid $19.99, I still was afraid to say, hey, do you believe that this $19.99 can, with the right action, can outweigh and be more profitable for you and more rewarding for you, this $11.40 an hour, right? At that point, I was not ready to believe that. So I dropped this one, and I kept this for some time until I finally wound up dropping that too, because I didn't have no love for this, but I had love for this. But the thing I loved, I squashed because of the thing that I knew, right? How many times in your life have you made a decision and you chose the thing that you knew over the thing that you loved, right? I had an orgasm here and not here. This was just going through the motions. The job was just going through the motions. Like, here I'm showing up, yeah, whatever, right? No big deal. Okay, I do my job, I do it well, right? This was just showing up. This was showing up to the party, right? This was showing up to the party because I was invited. This was showing up to the party and showing out at the party and being the life of the party, right? That's what this was, right? So I want you guys to think, when has that happened to you, in your life? It may have happened more than once. It happened to me more than once. How did that make you feel after you made that decision, right? To snuff out the thing that gave you the orgasm, to snuff out the thing that literally popped your cherry for the thing that you knew, for the sense of security that you knew, right? And how did you feel after that? Did you feel like you sold yourself out? Did you feel like, oh, well, I did that because that's what my mom did, or that's what my dad did, and they turned out all right. Look at that, right? Think back, and see which decision did you make? And if you made that decision and here you are some years later, how did that work out for you, right? Ask yourself, how did that work out for you? What would the road have been had you taken the orgasm route versus the safety route? Interesting. So when I think back, to that story, I wanted to tell you guys, because there's a lot of times in our lives where we're faced with decisions like that. Well, we can go this way, that's new, and it doesn't really kind of look like it's possible because you don't have anything to look at and to touch and to say, I know a person like me can do this, right? So a lot of times we decide to stay with what we already know, stay with what our family already told us, stay with what our friends already told us, or stay with what we decided to stay with, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever you started, working or what have you, or doing whatever it is. And I implore you to just think about that. And as we move forward, because obviously, the year is rounding up. It rounds up really fast. As we move forward, think about, are you going into the next week? Now notice, I'm not going to talk about waiting until next year. Are you going into the next week? Are you going to continue to stay with the thing that you know, even though it hasn't given you that orgasm, right? The thing that you know, even though your cherry still has not been popped, and it feels so good to have your cherry popped, right? But you ain't had it. Decide what you're going to do. Decide what is worth it to you? What is worth it to you? Moving forward. All right. So other than that, guys, definitely stay tuned, for upcoming epiphanies, if you will, because I have more, right? Like I said, that wasn't the only time that my cherry was popped, but that was indeed the first time that my cherry was popped. All right, now hopefully you enjoyed that video, all right, on being an entrepreneur virgin, how I got my cherry popped. All right, so I'm glad that you guys stuck in there to the end, and hopefully you guys had an epiphany yourself. That's what it's all about, having an epiphany yourself, seeing how you can go from wherever you are to wherever it is that you want to be, with the change of the mindset, right? And really just making that change and getting your cherry popped, getting that entrepreneur cherry popped. All right. Now, like I promised, I said I had a bonus for you. All right. First things first. If you want to know about my #1 money making opportunity right now, I'll basically leave a link down below. That'll be the first link in the description. I'll leave that so you can go ahead and check that out if you want to start making some cool, sweet income online or offline. All right, check it out. But I do have an absolute bonus for you guys, all right, just for sticking around to the end. No matter what business you are, if you're trying to learn how to start a business, right, if you're already in a business and you're not sure how to kind of get it off the ground, you need any help with marketing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some marketing training, some free marketing training. I'm going to give you access to some of my free marketing training, showing newbies how to basically start a business from scratch, right? Start from zero and get somewhere, right? That's what I'm all about, and helping you guys, all right? Whether you started yesterday or whether you started 20 years ago, right? You are in the right place. And I'll put that's going to be the second link down in the description, so you can rock out with that, get you some free training. All right. And definitely, if you are ready to take your business to the next level, ready to take it serious, you'll definitely see my cell phone number down below. You can go ahead and text me if you're ready to invest and take your business to the next level. Okay. And really get started with your online business or your offline business. All right, definitely reach out to me. Other than that, guys, you already know, now that you're subscribers, right? Because I know you subscribe, and crush the bell so you can be alerted the next time I put out some content. All right. But other than that, guys, you already know. This is D Card Lady, and we're gonna take this ride to the top, baby. All right, and we out.